So, a polytrauma patient. A syndrome of multiple injuries exceeding a definite severity score. So, injury severity score of at least 17, according to Professor Omata Trenz, a German trauma surgeon, with consecutive systemic reactions which may lead to failure of remote or primary uninjured organs or vital systems. So, a polytrauma patient is more of a sepsis patient, ARDS patient, pancreatitis patient, where most of the times there could be injury to other organs which are not primarily involved during the acute episode. Okay. There are 3 time durations where the patient might die after a trauma. The first peak is within seconds to minutes. Most of these patients are not salvageable. Okay, they die on spot because of severe TBI or high spinal cord injury or a major cardiac or a vascular injury. Okay, these patients do not reach us. Where we can make a difference is this second peak, the minutes to hours, where the golden hour of trauma comes into play. This is where we will be dealing with the patients where rapid assessment and resuscitation is required, and this is the major chunk of today's talk. The third peak is a continuation of intensive care. Most of these patients will end up having all complications of intensive care, where they will die of sepsis and MOTS. Mind you, 25% of the patients fall into this category where only prevention can help, nothing else other than prevention. The very basic of ATLS is treat the immediate cause which is going to kill the patient immediately. So treat the greatest threat to life first. For example, if a patient is having a traumatic brain injury and is having a tension pneumothorax, forget about the traumatic brain injury. Immediately TBI is not going to kill him, but a tension pneumothorax will kill him. Okay, so that is the basic principle of ATLS. Whatever is going to kill the patient immediately, treat that first. Rest everything can be taken care of once the patient survives. Never allow the lack of definitive diagnosis to impede the application of indicated treatment. Okay, don't try to have a conclusive diagnosis in hand before starting resuscitation. A detailed history is not essential. Once the patient comes in, first thing you should do is a primary survey. You can take a history even in the secondary survey. Okay, so you do not require a detailed history to start your resuscitative effects. So a detailed history is not essential to begin the evaluation of patient with acute injuries. So in nutshell, treat greatest threat to life first. Definitive diagnosis is not immediately important. Time is essence. We are speaking about golden hour of trauma. We'll speak about minutes and seconds when patient has circulatory arrest. Do no further harm. So these 3 things we'll be discussing. The initial assessment of any trauma patient should include all this. Okay, your ER or trauma team is always prepared. Okay, in terms when there's a mass casualty, triaging is very important, and we start immediately with A, B, C, D, E. Just not assessing, with immediate resuscitation of patients with life-threatening injuries. As I said, most common, which I'll keep on quoting, is tension pneumothorax. Once resuscitation is started, patient is starting stabilizing, then you can use your adjuvants. Consider the need for transfer to a patient to a level 1 trauma care. Once all this is done, when the patient is stabilized, then you can do a head-to-toe evaluation and take the patient's detailed history. Till the patient is stabilized, do not try to go into details of the history. Then you can do adjuncts of secondary survey, continued post-resuscitation care, and definitely subsequent definitive care. The second core concept of ATLS is your primary and secondary survey should keep on be repeated, especially the primary survey. Once the patient stabilizes, that does not mean that you will not do a primary survey again. Because in the hurry you might have overlooked few things. Second thing, the patient might have improved after your resuscitation but now is deteriorating again. So again you run a primary check. Okay, so it is always repeated. Okay, you don't have to do all the steps which are given in ATLS in every patient. Few steps can be skipped. For example, if a patient is talking normally, you know that most of the times his airway is okay. Okay, you don't have to go and check whether he is having oral cavity bleeding or laryngeal trauma. You can look for other injuries normally. When in doubt, all your trauma patients should be treated in a trauma center. So if you are in a pre-hospital setting, ATLS says almost every patient should go to a level 1 trauma center. GCS of less than 13, systolic blood pressure of 90 and the respiration of less than 10 or 29, or we feel that the patient will require ventilatory support, there is no ambiguity in this. All these patients has to be treated in a trauma center only. Okay? If these three are not present, then if any of these is present, which includes penetrating trauma to head and neck, flail chest, proximal long bone fractures, pelvic injuries, paralysis, crushed pulseless extremities, again these patients should be shifted to a trauma care only. Apart from this, whenever you are in doubt, better shift the patient to a trauma center. It is like your management of SAH or centers where you can do a primary PCI, because we are speaking about golden hours of trauma. Okay, so if you delay here, most of the times your patient might not be salvageable or the limb might not be salvageable. Your primary survey includes A, B, C, D, E with emphasis on identifying and treating things which are immediately life-threatening. Okay, so A is your airway maintenance with C-spine protection, B is breathing and ventilation, C is circulation with hemorrhagic control, disability and exposure. So we'll come one by one. Easiest way of assessing is just ask the patient how he is and what happened. Okay, if the patient is able to inform you, which means that he is able to speak, he is able to identify himself and is able to narrate the incident, there is nothing life-threatening immediately. Okay, so there's a 10-second assessment which ATLS says, ask the patient to identify himself, name and what happened. If he is able to do this, there is no immediate life-threatening incident there. If the patient is talking, there's a momentary reassurance. If he is refused to lie down, okay, which means that something is there which is not able to, he is not able to breathe normally. Okay, so look for maxillofacial injuries which is inside. Look for airway trauma. Look for breathing related issues. All severely injured patients should be given oxygen, at least initially. Less than 94% is not accepted anywhere in ATLS. Before doing any advanced maneuvers, always try to suction your oral airway, clear the secretions, do a chin lift or jaw thrust, but always take care of your cervical spine. Unless there is a specific way that you have ruled out, there is no cervical spine injury. Okay. 36% of secondary spinal injuries is during resuscitation. Please remember this. Okay. So always take care of your cervical spine while doing initial resuscitation. There is no head tilt. Okay, ATLS says unless there is recommended, unless you are trying to intubate the patient, do not do a head tilt. Just do a chin lift or a jaw thrust. Even that has to be done along with another person stabilizing your spine. Most of the patients might be full stomach, eaten alcohol, so anticipate vomiting and aspiration, and appropriate gastric decompression has to be initiated immediately. Okay. So even when you are doing chin lift and jaw thrust, you can see that another hand is stabilizing the spine. Okay. So whenever you are addressing the airway, one person should not do it. You are doing harm to the patient if one person is trying to address the airway. Okay. So we'll come when intubation we need more people, but one person always stabilizes the spine unless you have ruled out that there is no spinal injury. Okay. Do not do a head tilt unless you are going to intubate the patient. So there could be hoarseness, subcutaneous emphysema, and if there's a palpable fracture, probably you have a laryngeal injury there. These patients you may not be able to intubate, so this has to be assessed in the airway assessment. So look, listen and feel concept is what has been taken over from ACLS. Look at the rate and depth of respiration, see if there are engorged neck veins, any tracheal deviation, bilateral chest movements, any use of accessory muscles. So if the level of spinal cord injury is below C3, most of the time your diaphragm is preserved. So the patient might be having a diaphragmatic breathing, which is a paradoxical breathing. But your intercostals are not, intercostals are getting involved when even there is a low spinal cord injury. So look for those: hemothorax, pneumothorax, crepitus, and hoarseness and dysphonia. So this generally involves the entire airway assessment of the patient, including life-threatening hemothorax and pneumothorax. So if you feel that the patient requires a definitive airway is anything which will go beyond the vocal cords. Okay. First, be prepared for an eventuality. All emergency intubations or difficult airways. Restrict cervical spine motion. Okay. So how many people do you think should be there as a part of ATLS team just to take care of the airway? 1, 2, 3, 4. At least 3. Okay. One person will be doing precoid maneuver, one person will hold the spine, the other intubates. So minimum 3. If you go to the difficult airway societies, the airway team should have 6 people who are trained in airway management. Okay. So you pre-oxygenate by 100% oxygen, you assess the airway anatomy. ATLS says lemon is what is used. So most of us are from anesthesia background, you can quickly say what is L? Look externally. Okay, so you're looking for clots, you're looking for retracted jaw, you're looking for maxillofacial injuries, you're looking for if the patient is having inhalation burns. What is E? How do you evaluate? What is 332? Most of us have forgotten anesthesia. Okay, so it is interincisor distance, thyromental distance, and the distance between the floor of mouth and the thyroid notch. So that's 3, 3 and 2. M is Malampati, O is obstruction, N is neck. Please do not try and assess if the patient is having neck mobility or not. Okay, so the neck is always stable and remains stable. If you find any of this is present, please call for assistance, which means that over and above 3 people. It's not that you restrict with 3 people. Intubate, drug assisted intubation. So if you, most of them, you must have read, ATLS has come with an update in 2018. Okay, so they have removed the terminology of rapid sequence intubation and they have changed it to drug assisted intubation. Nothing in the sequence has changed, only the name has changed. Okay. So if you are unsuccessful, consider your adjuvants, which will include a bougie, intubating LMAs, laryngeotracheal airway. Consider awake intubation. Most of the times, this is only theoretical. You will not be in a position to do that. This is not there. Consider a definitive surgical airway. What about percutaneous tracheostomy? Can you do percutaneous tracheostomy? No. In acute trauma care, please do not try heroics. You might have done hundreds of tracheostomies percutaneously, but it is not recommended in patients with acute trauma. ATLS say definite no. So what is drug assisted intubation? Have a plan in place, know where your rescue equipments are, ensure that suction and ability to deliver positive pressure ventilation, pre-oxygenate, precoid pressure, induction drug. So even the previous update of ATLS said etomidate should be the drug of choice for any patient who is in trauma. Okay, it's most cardiostable, doesn't affect your neurological outcomes. Succinylcholine, patient with severe TBI, GCS is 7. Want to use succinylcholine? How many says yes? I says I am going to use succinylcholine. Nobody? Succinylcholine is the drug of choice, irrespective of severity of TBI. It's a myth that succinylcholine increases ICP. There is no proven data that succinylcholine increases the ICP, rather than only transient increases in ICP, which comes down to baseline within seconds. And that transient increase in ICP is because of your increased muscle spindle activity, nothing to do with brain. So no other drug as of now is recommended by ATLS, not even rocuronium. So in acute trauma, irrespective of whatever the TBI is, choline is to be used, and at least 100 milligram. Don't underdose choline. When will you not use succinylcholine? Burns, more than 48 hours. Patient with chronic neuromuscular issues. Okay, everything else can be handled. Hyperkalemia definitely can be handled. Intubate the patient orotracheally. Confirm your presence of tube by carbon dioxide exhaler. The ACLS says you can use ultrasound as well. ATLS has still not accepted ultrasound for confirming tube position, but if you have it, because most of the trauma centers will be doing fast, you can also look for confirmation of tube position. This is how we routinely do it. Release your precoid pressure after that. Once the tube is confirmed, inflated, only then you release your precoid pressure and then ventilate the patient. So when will you do it? If patient is not able to maintain the patent airway, you are not able to oxygenate by face and mask, obtunded status, severe head injuries. Surgical airways, edema of glottis, fracture of larynx, severe oropharyngeal hemorrhage obstructing your airway, inability to place an endotracheal tube through the vocal cords. That's when you consider surgical airway, which is cricothyrotomy surgical or a surgical tracheostomy. Percutaneous tracheostomy is definitely no. Always, while assessing for airway, have a concomitant look at your chest. Okay, as I said, most of the patients might die of tension pneumothorax. So, once you have intubated the patient, now you might aggravate your tension pneumothorax, the patient might collapse. So, it is always a clinical diagnosis, do not wait for radiological confirmation. Though now EFAST has been included in ATLS algorithms, so apart from doing normal fast, you can look for pneumothorax and hemothorax with an ultrasound. Do not wait for radiological confirmation. Over the needle or a finger thoracostomy. So, where will you put your needle? Tension pneumothorax. Anybody wants to put in a second intercostal space? No. Okay, it has been removed now. Second intercostal space is not recommended anymore. The reason behind is most of the pre-hospital care, when they were putting a second intercostal space needle, they were injuring major vessels. So now the ATLS says you put it in the fifth intercostal space, just anterior to the mid-axillary line. If you are not able to put the needle, or if it gets kinked for some reason, just do a finger thoracostomy, followed by always place an ICD. Just needle decompression is not going to help. Fifth intercostal space anterior to the mid-axillary line. So this generally involves the survey of airway and breathing. Okay, always also look for flail chest and massive hemothorax, which is a part of your EFAST. Circulation, check your pulses, your routine BP, pulse, capillary refills, look for cyanosis. But most of these will not hold true in patients with children and elderly. The elderly might be on beta blockers. The capillary refill time of 3 seconds might not hold true in children. So be careful in children and elderly, and just remember, once pneumothorax has been ruled out, all patients in shock are bleeding, unless proved otherwise, which means that the patient could be in neurogenic shock as well. But for all practical reasons, patient is bleeding once tension pneumothorax as a cause of shock has been ruled out. So put in 2 large IV access, at least 18 gauge, nowadays 14 gauge cannulas are available, and control external bleeding. Okay. In the external bleeding, if you go to European trauma guidelines, you should use tourniquet only when your manual compression is failing. And if you place a tourniquet on a limb, you can use it for maximum of how many hours? 6 hours. Okay, up till 6 hours, limb viability is not lost. So you can use tourniquet till 6 hours. So since we are expecting the patient is bleeding, you should look for bleed all over. Around the patient, over the patient, behind the patient, and 4 more cavities in the body. Patient can have massive hemothoraxes, hemoperitoneum, long bone fractures, and pelvic injuries. All this can have massive hemorrhage. More than 2 liters of blood is lost in any pelvic injury if it is so displaced. So this is an update from ATLS. Most of us have gone through this ATLS class of hemorrhagic shock 1, 2, 3 and 4 for decades now. But the ATLS update 2018 have removed all the numbers here. There is no number in heart rate, blood pressure, pulse pressure, respiratory rate, urine output, GCS. There is nothing there. It's just increased, decreased, equivocal or not. Okay, the only number which is still being carried forward is approximate blood loss, which is 15 to 30, 31 to 40 and more than 40. Okay, just remember blood pressure. If a patient is hypotensive, see, even in class 3 shock, your BP could still be normal because of compensation. Yesterday we were speaking about compensatory shock. Okay, so if a patient is hypotensive, he has already lost more than 40% of his blood volume. Okay, so this is what I want to emphasize. Rest base deficit, you should remember. Lactates have still not been included in ATLS algorithm, but the European Trauma Council says you can grade the severity of trauma based on your lactate levels. 2 to 6, 6 to 9 and more than 9. Need for blood products, massive transfusion protocols. So we'll have a separate talk on massive transfusion protocol. So you might resuscitate the patient. Your patient will fall into 3 specific categories. One is he is rapidly responding to whatever you're doing. You're giving blood, patient stabilizes, he's not deteriorating any further. Most of these patients will not require anything. Early presence of surgeon is still needed. Okay. Transient response is a patient you are giving blood, his BP is coming up, heart rate is slowing down, moment the blood is stopped, he is back to square one, he is bleeding again. Here you will require large amounts of blood and immediate surgical intervention. And minimal or no response, go to OR immediately. Do not use this many crystalloids in trauma resuscitation, especially in the early hour. More than 20 ml per kg is not recommended. Even 20 ml per kg of crystalloid should be used judiciously. This is the new update from ATLS in 2018. Even 20 ml per kg of crystalloid. If a 60 kg person comes, you should not give more than 1.5 liters of crystalloid. Story over there. So it will cause edema, compartment syndrome, you can cause hemodilution, hypothermia, coagulopathy, leading into triad of death and disruption of clot when you are pushing in too much of crystalloids. So what is recommended nowadays is, when a patient is having class 3, class 4 shock, give blood and blood products only. Okay. So all hospitals should be prepared. That is why the patient has to be shifted to a level 1 trauma care, because those hospitals are prepared for massive transfusions. So RBC FFB to platelet 1:1:1. If not 1:1:1, give at least 2:1:1, which is for every 2 PRBCs, give at least 1 plasma and 1 RDP. Okay. So always remember, most of these patients who are coming today might have antiplatelets, anticoagulants, and you should remember reversal agent. So what is the reversal agent for dabigatran? Okay, it's not available in India. So what are you going to do? PCC. Okay. Are there any reversal agents for antiplatelets? No. So the patient is on aspirin clopid, you will have to transfuse only platelets. You cannot do anything more. So goals will be hemostatic resuscitation, which means don't try to get your BP very high. 80 is acceptable if the patient does not have TBI. All hemorrhagic shock, no TBI, systolic BP 80 is acceptable. Severe TBI, your MAP should be 80. Crystalloids 20 ml per kg, judicious and restricted. Don't go beyond this. No colloids at all. This I have not written specifically about albumin here, because as an answer to exam, if anybody says whether you're going to use colloids in trauma resuscitation, the first answer is no. HAS is out. Everybody knows. What about albumin? Can you use albumin? Albumin is contraindicated in TBI. Everybody knows this, safe trial. So please do not use albumin in trauma resuscitation. Use blood and blood products only. So no colloids. Blood and products transfusion, early use of tranexamic acid. Based on which trial? CRASH. Okay. So give a gram of bolus followed by gram over 8 hours. What if the patient comes after 3 hours? CRASH says you should give within 3 hours. What about after 3 hours? Will you still give Trenexa? No. Please go back and read the CRASH trial. Prevent coagulopathy of trauma. Okay. So apart from controlling the immediate bleeding, your goal of resuscitation is to prevent subsequent bleeding. Most of these patients will go into coagulopathy of trauma, into triad of death, and then you will not be able to do anything irrespective of however experienced you are. So patient, when you will have to initiate transfusion protocols. Okay. So TASH and ABC score. ABC is much simpler than TASH, only 4 parameters. Heart rate of 120, systolic blood pressure of 90. Okay. Positive, fast and penetrating trauma. Any 2 of this is present, MTP should be activated. Okay. Because look at this. As I said, if the patient is hypotensive, he has already lost 40% of his blood volume. Okay. So any hypotensive trauma patient who is coming into ER, your first call should be to the blood bank. Okay. TASH is 0 to 28. Okay. Any score of more than 12 is significant TASH. So it includes gender, hemoglobin, systolic blood pressure, heart rate, positive, fast, complex, long both pelvic fractures and base deficits. So as a part of massive transfusion, what blood group are you expecting from blood bank? What about plasma? AB? AB negative or positive? AB positive. Okay. So now there's a new recommendation from ATLS. All multiparous women, donations from all multiparous women should not be part of massive transfusion protocols. okay, because of antigenicity. So predefined massive transfusion protocols are associated with reduction in organ failure and post-injury complications. So just by resuscitation you are not going to achieve anything. Simultaneous efforts should be made to control the bleeding, and for that you need a surgeon or radiologist and a pelvic stabilization. So aggressive and continued volume resuscitation is not a substitute for definitive hemorrhagic control. So you go for DCR. So once your hemostatic resuscitation is achieved, the surgeon chips in, controls the bleeding, prevents the contamination, and he does not close the abdomen. He just closes the layer, or he can leave the abdomen open, leave a laparoscoma. That gives us time to correct your hypothermia, coagulopathy and acidosis. And once this is done, after 48 hours, we can go in, relook, and then decide what to do about the injured organs. What if the patient comes to you and has a cardiac arrest? Traumatic circulatory arrest, penetrating or blunt with no pulse. Okay, within 2 minutes, your CPR is done, your airway is secured, you are given oxygen, and your surgeon is ready. By this, if you are able to achieve ROIC, very good, nothing to be done further. But not bilateral chest decompression. Okay, so if a patient has a traumatic circulatory arrest and 2 minutes of CPR, you have not achieved ROIC, do not look for whether the patient is having pneumothorax or not. You put in ICDs both sides. Okay, so after that you achieve an ROIC, very well, chest tubes are there, then subsequently usual management. Even after chest compression is decompression, the patient remains in arrest, you do a thoracotomy. The time emphasis is from ER till thoracotomy is only 3 minutes. Okay, so you do a thoracotomy and a vertical pericardiectomy also. So if there is going to be a clot which is compressing your ventricles, you remove it openly by doing a stenotomy. So it's all done in ER. After that, if there is cardiac injury, you remove the clot, do a repair and try and achieve ROIC. There is no cardiac injury and the patient is hypovolemic still, just put the clamp on aorta, either abdomen or thoracic. Forget about the organs. Okay. So abdomen, clamp your aorta, hemostasis clamp, and continue resuscitative efforts and continue CPR. Even after clamping, if the patient remains in cardiac arrest, you cannot do much. So once your patient's circulation is okay, airway is okay, breathing is okay, that's when you look for disability, look for neurological examination, Glasgow Coma Scale. Be careful in head injury patients. Still you have not ruled out that the patient is having spinal injury. So till you have ruled out the patient is having spinal injury by radiographic or clinical methods, all precautions for spinal injury unless the patient is in circulatory arrest holds good. So how will you find out whether the patient is having spinal injury or not? Most of the times the patient is not shiftable to radiologic ward. What is nexus criteria for assessment of spine? Okay. So all patients have spinal injury unless he is conscious, there is no neurological deficit, there is no distracting injury, which means there is no shock. If the patient is in shock, then you need a radiological investigation to find out whether the patient is having spinal injury or not. No history of any intoxication and no pain at the back, and his complete range of spinal motion is present. Unless all this is there, all patients have spinal injury unless proved radiologically. So undress, make sure that patient does not land up in hypothermia, maintain spinal precautions, inspect axilla perineum and obviously warm blankets. So your adjuvants to your primary survey will be whole host of investigations. Remember your FAST and DPL. So you are looking for blood in abdomen, you are looking for blood in the pelvis, you are looking for cardiac tamponade, and now it is extended FAST. So you are looking for hemothorax in both pleural cavities, you are also looking for pneumothorax anteriorly. So 6 things, 5 seconds, you will know whether the patient is having major injury or not. Once this is done, your patient is stabilized, you have had your coffee, then do your secondary survey. ABCDs is completed, resuscitative efforts are well established and the patient is demonstrating normalization of vital signs. Then you complete your history and reassessment. As I said, the principle of ATLS says you should repeat your primary survey again and again and again. Patient comes to ER, E fast is negative, that does not mean that after 2 hours his fast will not be positive. Okay, so again and again you should keep on doing your primary survey. So ample allergies, medication, past medical history, last meal, and what led to the trauma. So head to toe examination, we all know this. So adjuncts to the secondary survey will be all your battery of radiological investigations, contrast angiography, bronchoscopy, esophagoscopy. Okay, but if the patient is unstable, no investigation is recommended, patient goes to the OR immediately. You will feel a relief when you have achieved normal vitals, hematocrit of more than 21, normal coagulation function in terms of TEG, normal serum electrolytes, normal lactates, SVO2, normal high cardiac output or normal urine output. As I said, 2 principles of ATLS you should always remember. One is treat your life-threatening injuries which is going to cause death immediately. First is that priority. Second, primary survey again. Ensure new findings are not overlooked and new deterioration. Once everything is done, you can shift the patient to OR, ICU or ward, wherever the patient wants. So treat your life-threatening injuries. Primary survey has to be repeated multiple times. Early control of bleeding and resuscitation, but do not forget coagulopathy, blood and blood products, and take care of spine of all times. This is nutshell in ATLS. Thank you.